Welcome to Native Notion, a gaming podcast that isn't afraid to talk anything and everything. Here's your host, Klamath.
Yo, what's good? What's really good? How's everybody doing today? Yo, I appreciate the fact that you all are out here right now. I'll just let you know what's going on in my life right now. As of now, work has not had slowed down, right? That should come as no surprise to anyone who actually knows me. But in the future, it may slow down. Just not sure when that will happen. Today is Christmas, and I hope everybody is having a happy holiday period. Honestly, I do feel that way. In years past, it was hard for me, but somehow I got through it. So if you're in that struggle right now, let you know at the light at the end of the tunnel, it may not be visible, but it is there. So, no, honestly, I do thank you for listening in, and I hope the fact that you all are here is a bright spot in your day. So let's get to the topic. Today, we're going to be talking about something that is true and dear to my life, which is work. No, it's not really a laughing matter. If you didn't know at this point, there has been multiple attacks on the power grid since like the last 2 months or so. And I have no idea why, but there are people out there who their only desire, right, as a Joker said, is to watch the world burn. Like, why is that fun for anyone? I don't get it, honest to God. It honestly doesn't make any sense to me. If you did not know, I do work in the power field. So when I hear about these events, I definitely turn and study into them. Yeah, so if you didn't know, there was an attack that happened out in North Carolina. There's the energy company out there is Duke Energy, and it ended up being 2 weeks ago, I think, where somebody or a group of people, they end up coordinating an attack across different locations, and it ended up causing quite the effect, like more than most people would realize what it would cause. Ultimately, they ended up attacking what was called a transmission facility. That transmission facility is a high voltage substation that transmits, generally speaking, high voltage into either equal or higher voltages. Throughout the United States, we have a wide range of voltages that we do run on, and I would suspect that is also true throughout the world. Voltage is generally it is a way for you to transmit power from one location to another location. It gives it the energy that's necessary to move it. Okay, so generally speaking, the higher the voltage, the more people that are affected by this kind of stuff, right? So if you're talking about like the overall effect on a power grid, the highest voltage possible will be the largest effect that could possibly happen. Now, that's not always the case. Realize that sometimes there are places that are high voltage, high energy, but there's not a direct effect that happens to the surrounding area by an attack on that location. So what ends up happening is that when these do happen, you have to take safety into consideration, and you're going to isolate the damaged section, right? That's no different than anything that you might do. You're working in your house, you're going to find something that's damaged, right? Say it's a wall and you need to do some drywall repair. You're going to isolate it. And when I say isolate it, I mean, you're going to cut around wherever the damaged portion is, and then you're going to fix it, right? And that gives you, a solid working area. in terms of electricity, when you're isolated in a damaged area, this is for safety reasons, right? It's not as if the lines, the transformers, the breakers, anything of that nature, all the different power equipment that's on there, it's not as if they can repair themselves, right? So if there's physical damage that occurs to these components, they need somebody to go out there and fix it. And by fixing it, they have to put their hands on, right? That's a big deal. Putting your hands on electrical components is a wide open door to somebody getting killed, right? That the potential that's associated with electrical systems it can be incredibly high, and it doesn't take a lot of energy inside of an electrical system to kill somebody, right? Generally speaking, it can happen on pretty low voltages but it's the voltages that aren't the voltages themselves aren't the concern in terms of whether or not that's deadly potential. But it's the current that flows in there, right? It doesn't take a lot of current. All it takes is current through the right location. If I remember correctly, it is 0.1 amps, right? So 0.1 amps or 100 milliamps, 100 milliamps is enough to kill you. Now, that, mind you, that has to flow a very specific direction in your body. If it crosses your heart, and generally speaking, when they talk about crossing your heart, they usually mean from like a corner to corner type of situation, right? That electrical flow that happens in your heart is actually enough to stop your heart. And that's why it's considered deadly. Now, that is never mind the fact that like high currents, how they can literally burn you, right? If you've ever worked on any electrical components, right? If you've ever changed the battery on a car and accidentally used when you're taking off the bolts, the bolts that hold it down, right? The connection points to your electrical system, and you tap that wrench from positive to negative terminal, and you saw the spark, and your hand immediately let go. That is real, right? That's, mind you, a car battery is 12 volts, right? It doesn't take a ton of voltage. Now, that is a DC system, and DC or direct current is significantly more dangerous to the average person than it is than what AC is. But it doesn't mean that you should feel comfortable around any of it. In fact, anybody who feels comfortable working on electrical components, I'm really concerned, right? Comfort when it comes to working on electrical parts in your home, outside of your home, the people that are working out in the field and stuff like that. Comfort generally means you're going to make a mistake, and that mistake could be the difference between you living and dying. Okay, so that's not something that I honestly think is something that people should be comfortable working around. And I think most people that are trained and understand the consequences and the effects that are associated with them, I think they have a healthy fear or respect for the components that they're working on. Right now, crews that are working out on high voltages, they take safety measures. Like I talked about, they'll isolate the area. They also ground equipment. So that is attaching, basically a cord. So that's the best way I can describe it. A cord that attaches from, the potentially energized location, usually to like a neutral, but maybe to a grounding strap or something of that nature. If it does become energized, that'll be the path of least resistance, because electricity flows in the path of least resistance. And instead of going to where they're working, it'll go through the grounds, and it'll go to ground, right? That's what it means when they talk about grounds. It'll go to ground, therefore potentially saving the life of the person that's working on the equipment. Okay. Now, there are consequences that come with energizing a piece of equipment that have grounds on it, because that is it is a very, very low resistance wire, which means it can allow a lot of flow to go through it, right? And so that's a different answer that goes with that. But there are a lot of different things that go into that, right? For my job, I had to train for 2 to 2.5 years. So with that, in training in that time period, I had to become effectively proficient in how to do my job, and I had to learn the ins and outs that go into doing the job that I do. On top of that, I actually had to get a certification from the North American Electric Reliability Council. The short acronym for that is NERC. That I had to get a certification from them saying that I sufficiently had enough knowledge to be able to operate the power grid. Okay. And mind you, my job with the group of people that I work with at the company that I work at, it's not necessarily the shortest time period. It's not necessarily the longest time period that goes into training personnel. Some of our groups, like our linemen and our wiremen, they're in training for 4 or 5 years. Okay. That is like legitimately, there's a healthy amount of respect that goes into learning the job, right? These people put a ton of effort and a ton of brain power into making sure that they know the ins and outs of these jobs. Now, mind you, like with any job that you'll ever do, that is not the end all that be all, right? Once you're done training, right, your training program, you get your certificate and they say, Omni Domni, you are now qualified, blah, blah, blah. That's not the end of your learning experience, nor is it the end of anything that you're going to be doing going forward, right? You're going to spend years and years and years constantly learning new things, right? And in fact, for me, that is a big part of the reason why I took the job that I did take. Prior to taking this job, I worked as a mechanic. Okay, not as a mechanic as you would define it as a mechanic, right? But I worked with my hands. I worked on steam plant equipment. I worked in generation, but on the actual generators and stuff of that nature, right? All of the valves, right? The lines that were associated with it. I did that. And I did that for years and years and years. And I decided that I wanted to challenge myself more. So I took this job, right? And so I'm constantly learning more information that goes into this job. And that's the same for anybody that's in my job. That's the same for the people that I work with, right? We're always learning new things. It doesn't mean that you can't master your craft, right? That's a completely different statement. There's some people who seem to think like, oh, you're a master at your job. Clearly, you know everything. No. Being a master at your job means that you're familiar enough with your job that you don't make the simple mistakes, okay? So, the whole point of me building that up there is to say, like, listen, these people that are doing this kind of stuff are incredibly familiar with the dangers that are associated with what it is that we operate. Okay, that's not the people who are attacking these locations, right? That's not the people that are shooting transformers or opening or closing switches out in the field that they shouldn't be doing, or going and cutting wires or breaking into substations and stealing equipment or opening breakers or whatever, like any of that kind of stuff. Those aren't those people. The people that are doing this are legitimately ignorant on the power system. Okay. That's not to say that they're dumb. They just don't know what it is that they're doing. They don't understand the full effect. They may understand if they do something, it'll do this, but they don't understand the overall effect that happens with that. Okay. It's a crazy thing to think about, that somebody would expose themselves to something that is so incredibly dangerous and pay no second mind to it, right? Just go ahead and do it. There are people that have gone out on the system that I operate in years past, have gone out and they've opened up switches that had power flowing through them. If you don't realize that, like, depending on the strength of the power system that's flowing on those switches, if you look at that, you could legitimately burn your retinas. That's not a joke. It's not like I'm making that up, right? The only reason that people know that this is the case is because past experience has shown, like, hey, they did this, and when they did this, they did that, right? And guess what? You look at an arc on a 500,000 volt system, when it opens under load, that bright arcing action that goes into it can damage your retinas. That is incredibly dangerous, right? And it seems like that would be nothing, right? There's somebody's like, oh, if I just turn this switch and if I rotate this wheel, everything will be fine, everything blah blah. No, like you are exposing yourselves to an incredible amounts of energy. Energy is the force that is applied all around us at all times, right? Some forces are significantly higher than others, right? Electricity being one of them. Electricity is significantly higher than any force that any human can produce. Okay, so these people that are doing this are fairly ignorant in the terms of how to operate a power system and the effects of operating it, right? Part of my job is understanding, if I do this, this is the result that happens from it, and that's the effect that happens to it, right? If I have to de-energize an entire town because of something that's happening, I understand the effect of me doing that, right? I know what I have to do. I know when I do that, what will happen. And I understand, if I do this, this is what I could potentially cause. Okay. That is experience, training, knowledge, understanding, right? There's no such thing. Like, honestly, I am not a big proponent of the college system that we have in the United States. I think it is actually a huge scam that people, they go off and they do these different things, and they act as if, if I go to school and I get a degree, then I will get a job that will help me live my life. That is okay. That might be true, right? That is definitely something that could be true. But a lot of times people are getting degrees in these areas that have no real translation into what it is you're going to be doing in the real world and how that's going to help you live the life that you want to live and everything like that. Like that, they just paid a bunch of money to basically do nothing. So many people I know that have gone to college, got a degree in something, and they work in some field that is completely unrelated to the degree they got, right? Just, man. Now, that's not to say that having a degree didn't help them get a job or anything like that, right? But knowledge that they gained from that was not applied, right? And that's where I differ from the concept of not trusting the college scheme that we have. I do believe that the knowledge that gets applied in school is incredibly important, right? You can't do anything without knowledge. Everything you do is striving to earn more knowledge or using knowledge that you have already gained. That is incredibly important. I'm a big proponent of trade schools. I think the trades are a way that you could live a life that you want to live, and it teaches you a valuable skill that you could be a useful member in society. That is completely true. If you don't know what I mean by talking about the trades, go look it up, right? There are a lot of different jobs within the trades that you can go and get schooling, get trained on it, get practical application. You can go get a job in the field that's associated with it. And if you don't like it, you can go do another trade, right? That is just, it's simple. Anyway, the knowledge that goes into that is huge, right? The people that are doing this just don't have the knowledge. It's not that they can't learn the knowledge. Maybe they don't have the resources to figure out how to get the knowledge behind it. But generally speaking, the people that are doing this are doing it under malicious reasons, right? Somebody wants to hurt the power company. They're upset that their bill is too high. Something of that nature. The number of times that I've heard that from people, mind you, most people, they are charged off of a base rate for the amount of electricity that they use in their home. So in reality, if you're charging, or if you're paying too much for your power bill, maybe reevaluate how much power you're using. Okay. Now, that's not to say that the rates in one place are better than another or anything like that. I personally believe here where I live, I have access to incredibly cheap power, right? It doesn't take a lot of money to actually operate the power plant. I'd say it doesn't take a lot of money, but in terms of what I use in my home, the cost per watt of usage is not as much here as when I lived in Phoenix, right? A lot more expensive down there. It is the reality of the situation, right? It costs more to live there in terms of what it is to get power delivered to your home. Therefore, it cost me more per watt that I used, right? But I realized, like, hey, my bill's higher. It's because I'm using a significant amount of more power, right? I'm running my computer more often. My kids are watching YouTube or whatever it is that they, Disney Plus or something of that nature, or they're on their Xbox, or my wife is, she's streaming some TV show that she wants to watch or something of that nature, right? The lights are on in the house. Every time I flush, the toilet, there's a little bit of power that's used, right? The pump that goes into refilling and whatnot. Turning on my heater, right? My heater is honestly probably the largest load I have in my entire home from month to month, right? Everything that I do costs some amount of money, right? But I recognize that. I legitimately recognize that. There have been times where my power bill has been higher, and I've asked my wife, like, what are we doing to cause our bill to be higher? I'm not blaming the power company, but honest to God, you hear so many people like, oh, the power company's trying to rip me off, and the power company's doing this, and they're just being malicious, and they're just making hand over fist of money, and blah, 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 blah. And like, that couldn't be farther from the truth in most scenarios, right? You don't understand that on a case-by-case basis, power companies are being fair to a lot of people. Over the last 2.5 years, I watched people legitimately take advantage of the system that was at hand. They didn't pay their power bill. They didn't pay their water bill. They didn't pay their bills, blah, 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 blah. And when push came to shove and it was time to start doing it, they were in significant debt. Those people were the first to complain about being charged for the money that they did not pay. Okay. There were some people that were forced into situations where they couldn't sustain their life because of the pandemic, right? But this is not the case. I see it quite often. There are people with tens of thousands of dollars in bills because they chose for 2.5 years not to pay a single bill, right? That's to just the company that I work for. That's not all the other companies that you use for your daily life, right? The different things that you use, right? You just took advantage of it. Those are the same people that cry wolf. They ask for more handouts. It's just crazy, right? And these are the type of people that go into doing things like what's happened out in North Carolina, what's happened in Washington, what's happened in Oregon, right? It's starting to pop up in different locations. What happened in New York in 2003, right? There's a lot of people who don't even know about this. Some people do, but a lot of people don't even know about this. The North American Electric Reliability Council was established based off of an incident that happened in Northeast U.S., New York, basically like the entirety of the Northeast seaboard going into Ontario, right? Because they due to excessive heat that happened, as well as some maintenance that had occurred and some lack of vegetation control, they ended up sagging lines. So when you overheat, you run too much power through a line, and there's not enough cold air. This is talking about overhead, right? There's not enough cold air to remove that heat. The lines literally stretch, right? So they sag. That should not be unknown to anybody. You can see that in just about anything you do. You heat something up, it stretches more, right? It's the same concept when you use hot water to clean dishes, why it breaks up hard gunk and stuff like that, because it separates the molecules that are there. So they ended up sagging and ran into or it hit tree lines. When it hit the tree lines, it caused fault current to flow through those trees, right? The system acted normally. It sensed the fault and it isolated that. Well, prior to it isolating it, it sent fault current in a massive location, right? And then when the fault isolation occurred, it caused a chain reaction of power flow shifting so hard within the system, it knocked out the entire northeast portion of the US. Okay. If I remember right, that was 5 days, right? So New York City, that was the epicenter, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, upstate New York, Boston, Vermont, New Hampshire, right? Like all these areas, right? And even going to the west, right? All of these areas were out of power. What ended up happening was there were a number of people that suffered from heat stroke, as well as there were people that were on life-saving measures that were unable to get power, right? And because they had no access to power, there was no ability, without taking measures of yours ahead of time, they couldn't They couldn't continue to use their life-saving equipment, and they died, right? There are people that died in the subways from exhaustion and stuff of that nature, right? It was a legitimate catastrophe, like the worst thing that could happen, right? Mind you, you're only 2 years removed from the Twin Towers, right? And everything, everybody, I mean, that took so much media attention, right? But in 2003, unless you were paying attention, did you even hear about this? No. And it's arguably one of the largest events that have ever happened in the US. Okay? That incident, because of what happened, that established the rules and regulations that go behind the North American Electric Reliability Council. They have what's called standards. You can look them up, NERC standards. Go ahead. If you want some light reading material, read through all of those pages. Let me tell you, I've done it a few times. It's good. Okay? But that was the backbone that established the authority for NERC to enforce the standards. Okay? Now, if you don't operate to the standards, you can be heavily fined. You could get your ability, your license to operate on the power system revoked. Okay? That is something that is possible. Okay? There are severe consequences that go behind not operating correctly. So when people go into these locations and they damage this equipment and it causes misoperation, you're talking about like some significant effects that are associated with this, right? People that are legitimately affected by this, right? Think about 3 weeks ago, 2 weeks ago in North Carolina, right? 55,000 people, or up to last I heard, it was like, I think last week, no, not last week, earlier this week, maybe they got their last person back into power, right? Think about that. 2 weeks without power. Everything you do, you consume some amount of energy from the power system, right? Could you live without power for 2 weeks? When push came to shove, I would say a vast majority of people could, right? But what if the entire area around you is without power? What would you do then? How are you going to make food for your family? How are you going to manage? Most people, when they can't do that, right? They manage it in another way. I'm going to go out to the store and I'll get something. Well, store doesn't have power. What are they going to do? Well, I'm going to go to the fast food restaurant. I'll buy a meal for there to last us, right? Well, guess what? They don't have power. What are you going to do now, right? What about what if you have a filter on your refrigerator and that's the water you drink? What if the water pump that feeds your neighborhood, your area, what if that's out? What are you going to do about water? Again, the supermarket doesn't have power. They're closed. What are you going to get water from? Right? Safe drinking water, mind you. Right? That's a life-giving material right there. What are you going to do? Right? That's the kinds of effects that happen from these kinds of misoperations, from people that place a tax onto it. 55,000 people. Now you might say, like, 55,000 people, my power company might have 55,000 people from, one area that's out of power. And I agree. Like, in this area, the large player is Puget Sound Energy. I am not an employee of Puget Sound Energy, right? But 55,000 people compared to their like 2 or 3 million, they're like, well, we're working on it. Not the biggest hit, right? But in North Carolina, 55,000 people is a lot of people, right? It's a big effect. It affected a very large area, right? That's a big deal. You got to realize that. That's a huge deal for that to happen. Then we've had continuing things from happening, right? Like, the thing you have to realize, and it's one of my pet peeves from working in this job, right? If you don't have knowledge on how the system operates, nor how to fix the system when something is out, you should really back down on your criticism of people that are attempting to fix the problem, right? Because ultimately, your misdirected anger towards the people that are doing the work doesn't solve anything, right? You have no idea how to do their job. Zero clue. None whatsoever. It's not even like you could attempt to do it because you have no idea. Okay? That's not to say that you should discredit yourself or I'm discrediting you, but you got to realize that I have worked my butt off to get to this point, right? And so have all the other people that are in that position to keep doing that. They are doing all of these things to the best of their ability and they're doing it safely, but they're working as fast as they can, right? Sometimes that is taking a lot longer, right? Things happen. Imagine that you're at your job. Say your job is, let's call it a market operator for, you work on Wall Street or something of that nature, right? Let's say that's what your job is. Well, every time that the stock market went down, I called you and I started yelling at you that you're causing this and you need to fix it and everything, now how could you be so bad at your job and everything, blah, 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 right? That doesn't seem fair, right? You're going to be on the other end. You're going to go, what the hell do you know about this? That I have nothing to do with that, right? Well, the same applies, right? It's not like I intentionally at any point put people out of power. Now understand sometimes I have to for safety reasons, right? But like for the most part, like these people are doing everything they can. Sometimes things happen, equipment breaks and you can't get a full group of people that are necessary to do the work in the middle of the night because not everybody hears their phone when it rings, right? Like recognize that these challenges are just that. They are challenges, right? And it's every step of the way. And once a crew gets out there and they start working on it, they're going to work as fast as they possibly can, but as safe as they possibly can in order to get the damaged equipment replaced and get everybody back in power. Like, realize this. The power company that provides your home is in the business of providing you power, right? I, as an employee, want you to be in power because you pay your bills, right? Now, I talked about that, like some people haven't paid their bills and that causes a lot of issues, right? But you pay your bills, right? And those bills you paying those bills goes towards maintaining the grid that we operate. In my case, I work for a public utility. It goes towards paying my paycheck, right? Those things, like all the things about my job, right? It comes from the customers. So I am in the business legitimately of keeping customers in power. That does good for you and it does good for me. It's a win-win. Okay. And that's the case for most utility workers, right? Or linemen or wiremen. Wiremen are like the definitions differ, right? The CEO, the city manager, right, depending on what you're talking about, whatever it may be, blah, blah, blah. These people are in the business of making sure that you are in power. So when power goes out, I can assure you, we are doing everything we can to figure out why it happened, how we can resolve the issue that's associated with that, how we can isolate that to get you back in power. It's not like we're delaying getting people out there. It's not that we're delaying trying to figure out what happened. Sometimes it's challenging, right? Especially when you're not physically in the field to see it. Inherently, a lot of electrical issues are tough to find because they're not visible, right? That is not always the case. Somebody could hit a pole somewhere or something of that nature, right? But it takes time, right? And sometimes you're going to run into some snags and some things of that nature, and it's going to take longer than you expected. I need people to recognize that that's the nature of the business, right? Sometimes it takes longer to change your oil in your car than it did the time before, right? Maybe the screw stripped, or maybe you couldn't get it loosened, or maybe for some reason you opened up a cap and it blew oil everywhere, and like something that is like relatively routine, but you made a mistake and it took a lot longer than you expected. Well, why is that different than any other place, right? People have like legitimately turned and made power a necessity, right? I will tell you that, like, in general, power is a commodity. That's not to say that power doesn't go into everyone's life, and they use it in basically everything that they do, right? So it acts as a necessity. In some cases, people need it for life-saving equipment, and that is a necessity at that point, right? That doesn't mean that we can guarantee power, right? What if somebody goes into a substation and opens up the breakers that feed everybody? I didn't do that, right? That's not something that I controlled. That's somebody else that went off and did their own thing, right? I can't guarantee 100% power. In fact, it would be naive of anybody to guarantee that, because you can't. If you're in a situation where you are dependent, and I mean this, dependent, not like, hey, I really like to play video games and I need power and stuff like that. No, I mean like you have a dialysis machine inside of your home, and that dialysis machine is what keeps you from dying every single day, right? Without it for one day and you could die, right? And now I'm not an expert on dialysis, but the thing to understand about that is that you have to take measures that are associated with what it is that you do or what you need in order to achieve what it is you're trying to achieve, right? So if you're in a situation where power is a necessity, you have a medical need for power, you should probably have a backup generator, right? That's true. I hate to say it. You're probably not in a position where you can go and spend a bunch of money on getting that, right? But that is a necessity, right? You have a basic need for power to maintain your life. Okay, that's a different scenario. That's not what I'm talking about here, right? We had a scenario where a company called Bonneville Power Association, they reported that somebody broke into one of their substations and shot rifles into their equipment in the substation. And that was right around Thanksgiving timeframe, if I remember correctly. And I think the people that entered into the substation cut the fence that were associated with it, right? Brought bolt cutters and cut a hole in the chain link fence that was there. And it caused the equipment that was damaged to relay out, right? They use relays in order to protect the damaged equipment. As far as I'm aware, that did not cause any issues outside of BPA required to repair the facilities that were damaged. Excuse me, just needed a drink there. But that still causes that costs money for BPA, and ultimately that cost is forwarded along to the people that they serve, right? BPA being Bonneville Power Association or Administration, excuse me. But it's their BPA is a federal entity, right? Like, you must be mistaken if you don't think that the federal government is getting involved with their substation being impacted, right? That's another side of this, right? A lot of people don't realize, like, hey, if I went out and I decided that I was going to physically attack a piece of power equipment, then if they catch me, like maybe I'll get caught by the local authorities or something like that, or like you're weighing the potential outcomes of that. But the reality of the situation is, if you are caught from being somebody that is caught doing something of that nature, the FBI is going to be the one that prosecutes you. You might have some local administration that prosecutes you for something else, but I can assure you that the FBI will be involved in prosecuting you in the Supreme Courts. Right? That's no joke. And if anybody knows, like, when the FBI puts their mind to putting somebody away, they achieve that, right? So they had that happen, right? And that's a big deal. BPA serves as a vital function to power in the Pacific Northwest. So from a power system operator perspective, and that's what I am, I'm a power system operator. We heard about this, right? We were one of the first people to hear about this, right? We kept our ear to the ground and kept an eye on what was happening, and they communicated with us, and like, we were interested in what happened, how they resolved it and everything, right? So, they also had like other substations distribution substations. Distribution is generally lower voltage. When I say lower, I mean compared to transmission voltage. This is what distribution substations, they are what serves power to the community. So not a lot of industrial, right? But a lot of commercial, residential homes, things of that nature. Those are the people that are affected by that. So that's these places that get attacked. That's what they're attacking, right? They're attacking the people that are served by it. The cost to repair that is going to be forwarded along, right? That's not to say that the cost to repair it isn't like capable of the company from absorbing it, But ultimately, that's how a business operates, right? If I have costs, my costs are going to be covered by the people that buy my product, right? That's kind of the way it works. So I'm not saying that it's the best situation. I'm not saying it's a great situation, but that's the truth of the situation, right? And that's true for like any business, right? Now sometimes you have small businesses that don't operate that way, and that's fine. Sometimes you have to not operate that way, right? You can't sustain forwarding along your costs to someone else when you're talking about like not making much off of the dollar that you spend, So, but there are different locations that are like dramatically affected by this kind of stuff. PSC has been hit quite a few times recently. My company, right? My company got hit today, right? Somebody or a group of people, we don't know. They entered into our substations. One through cut the fence. The other one cut the locks on the gate and opened up the gate itself, and then physically operated equipment within the substation. Now, that may be detrimental to the equipment, and that is yet to be seen. But if that is detrimental to the equipment, there is a possibility of having a few thousand people that are out of power for multiple days. Right? There's some unfortunate scenarios that go into how these electrical grids are set up, where the terrain is a direct effect behind being able to make it stronger. Okay, you can't physically change the way it's set up because of the terrain. So it's possible. I'm not saying that it will happen. I don't know. But rest assured that like the local authorities, obviously the people that are the highest people within the company that I work with, they are, working together. I'm sure that like state authorities and probably even the FBI are involved in some way. I don't know. I'm not involved in the administrative aspect that's associated with this, right? But these people are interested parties. They want to know what's happening, right? We have to file paperwork all over the place that's associated with it, right? But legitimately, somebody went in, some people went in. I don't know. We have no idea. We could speculate, but they went in and they operated equipment they have no knowledge on. They have no idea what they're doing, or the intent of trying to damage power company equipment is my guess. I mean, your guess is as good as mine, I should say. Oh, I don't understand why else they would want to do it. Are they trying to put people out of power? That is possible. People definitely do that kind of stuff, right? Where they maliciously go and operate equipment to try to put people out of power because they have some, what's the best way of saying it? They have some vendetta against the community. People are out to get them and all this different stuff, right? Yeah, it's a crazy thing to think about, right? I'm fortunate that today I didn't deal with a bunch of people that were really upset, even though it was Christmas morning that this happened, right? People weren't really upset, but we try to do everything we can to communicate what it is we can, try to keep people update. on the status and, like when we're going to get people back in power. Sometimes I don't know, right? Sometimes I am waiting on the crew that I have available to me to get out there and assess it and then figure out how long that's going to be. And even then, that's an estimate on their part, right? There's no saying that it's going to take that long. Sometimes things change, right? But sometimes I'm not informed. The people that are working out in the field may report to me at some point, like, hey, looks like it's going to take us about 2 hours longer than we expected. Okay, and then I will relay that information, right? So that way, on the public-facing side, we can report like, hey, it's going to be 2 hours longer than we expected, right? Or initially reported. It's going to be 2 hours longer than that. Sometimes those guys and gals, they're working their butt off, right? They don't have the time to report to me that has happened. Sometimes they do have time and they don't get it, but it's not like they're just sitting there twiddling their thumbs and the reason that's not being restored for 10 hours is because they didn't do any work, right? That couldn't be farther from the truth, right? Recognize that point. It's kind of a tough situation to be in. I hate it. As a person that is like completely and utterly involved in this process, it doesn't make any sense. And it never will make any sense why people will want to destroy the things that people have, right? Why somebody would want to, on Christmas morning, go in and manipulate equipment for the purpose of putting people out of power. Why? It doesn't make any sense. And a lot of times when people are looking for answers, they can't find the answers that make any sense to them because people generally aren't operating under the common sense or spectrum, if you will, or operating with any like direct understanding of why somebody would do this, right? I don't know. Most of the time we don't hear about that kind of stuff, right? Why people do things, right? We may hear that somebody gets arrested, and I mean that we may hear. That's not a guarantee. Sometimes our equipment gets damaged by personnel that shouldn't be operating it, or they shoot it or something like that, and then those people get arrested, and that's the only information we ever get about it. And I say we, I mean like my work group. So I have no idea. It could be anything, but it sucks that you have to tell people they are going to be without power for an extended period of time, especially in a time when they're relying on, the power that is given to them to be able to do the things that they want to do, right? That's certainly something to think about. It's not fun. It sucks to talk to people that are just trying to get information, and you have no information to give. Right? I don't know. I don't know when your power is going to be back. I can't tell you that because I don't want to give you a false sense of security and then have it not happen. Right? Yeah, it's crappy, right? That's going to be assuming that the equipment that was damaged or operated and potentially damaged in our system, that is millions and millions upon millions of dollars worth of equipment, right? That is no chump change at all. They may have to be replaced, right? It's unfathomable why somebody would want to cause that kind of damage, right? And that's when you get into like, when you cause damage to other people's equipment and how you get prosecuted, right? Usually depending on the value of the equipment that you damage depends on how you get charged. Well, guess what? That's probably going to be categorized as domestic terrorism and go under the microscope that is the federal government, and the prosecution that goes along with it as well. But now, mind you, federal terrorism, or national terrorism, it's a completely different story. And on top of that, it is generally speaking, it's the motive behind it, right? If somebody's intent was to go in and damage the equipment and put all these people out of power, that I could see them turning around and say, that is domestic terrorism, right? You did something with malicious intent, and you caused a ton of damage. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and label it as such. Now, mind you, if it was a 16-year-old kid that went in and broke in and thought he was being cool or something like that, and did some stuff, right? That it's probably not with malicious intent, right? I say probably, but you could legitimately argue that just like it's a kid being a stupid kid, right? They have no general understanding of what it is they're doing. Oh, yeah, it was kind of it was a rough day for a lot of people, especially in this region where you're having to deal with these problems that are out of your hands, right? Trying to figure out ways to tell people like, yeah, we're working on it. We'll get your power back in like some unsolicited amount of time, whatever it may be. And if it doesn't happen at that point, it's not because we're trying to, right? Like some people have put these like significant milestones on people, right? And they justify their thought processes behind, well, I was told my power would be back at 5 p.m. and it's 5:30 and my power's not back yet. What the fuck, power company? Yeah, they're often, I mean, that's not everybody, right? But there are people out there that hold that type of mentality, right? And it is a significant burden on the way that we operate, right? The way that I handle myself when I'm having to deal with people that act like this. So it sucks, right? It sucks that this is, again, Christmas Day. People being or trying to be just about being with their family. Now, mind you, I preach to my kids, right? The reason that we're getting together for these holidays is not because the events that happen at the holidays, right? It's not the gifts. It's not the food or anything like that, right? So we can be together with family, right? And a lot of times the people that are strong, right? The families that are strong will still figure out a way to make that work. And for those people, I thank you, right? You've done a service to both you and your family. For the people that did not, I'm not blaming you or anything. I just hope you realize, like, we're working on it. We're trying to be better, right? We want to bring you back, hopefully as soon as possible. Yeah, I mean, it's been fun. I've been busy doing this kind of stuff, but not everything's sunshine and lollipops and stuff like that. There's a lot of really crappy things that are happening in the world, and that's something that happened today. I haven't had a podcast out in a while. I struggle with ideas, right? Just being an idea kind of person, but this is like really close to me, right? Really, really close to me. So I felt it important to be able to talk about it. Hopefully it makes sense. If there are any questions that you might have, you can reach out to me in any number of ways. I have Discord. I have Twitter, Instagram. You can find the podcast on any number of hosting sites and reach out to me. My email is listed in my link tree that I have on my Twitter account. So feel free to take a listen to that. And as always, right, if you know anybody that may be interested in this topic or maybe even interested in the platform as a whole, feel free. Share it with them, right? Maybe they like it enough and they'll want to subscribe to the channel or boost the listening amount. I welcome all feedback. If somebody's going to tell me, like, listen, you had 30 minutes of your podcast that we couldn't hear a single word, well, that's useful information. Oftentimes I will go back and I will listen after I release it, because I kind of want to accept it for the raw aspect that is what it is. Mind you, I don't script any of my podcasts, and then listen to it and try to figure out, like, hey, how can I do better? I honestly urge everyone to recommend to me how I can improve in that sense, right? You can reach me in all these different locations. You can even find me on Twitch. I haven't streamed in a while. I'm telling you, my life is crazy. and I'm very protective of my children, so I don't want to put them on the internet. But please reach out to me. Any topic that you want me to talk about, or you want me to review, or even looking back and critiquing how it is that I performed in previous podcasts and stuff like that, I welcome the feedback. Mind you, that is not all feedback is warranted, nor is it welcomed, right? But I'm not going to turn you down and say, well, I don't want that feedback kind of situation. I'll listen to what you have to say. I may or may not respond. But you can rest assured that I'm probably going to take it and run with it, right? Try to improve upon it. So thank you. I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful holiday. I hope everything is great for you, and that the things that you're trying to achieve, you're able to, right? And your families are healthy and happy, and everybody's having a great time. Seriously, I hope that's true. Until the next time, I hope you guys have a wonderful, wonderful time, and I'll catch you later. Peace.
Thanks for listening to Native Notion. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. In the meantime, keep up with Klamath by following him on Twitch, Hover, and Twitter. All links are in the show notes. Until next time.